All right, so it's about that time. My name is Maggie, once again, and I'm going to talk about UX, specifically how it integrates into our Agile world. And the clicker is dead. All right, so I'm going to give you an overview about myself, but also talk about a little bit about UX process, UX integration, which is the main ingredient here. Talk about teams, but also some takeaways that I want you to leave this room with. And since one way to measure success, and I like to measure success as part of my job, is that if you can leave this room with one thing, right? And you take away one thing, you learn something new, I'm going to take that as a win. So with that said, I'm currently a UX consultant for Source Allies. A lot of my background is in design. Had some did my master's in human-computer interaction, and that's, long story short, kind of how I landed where I am today. I started working with developers and people who were really interested in technology. And that was never really something that I wanted to pursue as a career. I initially wanted to be an architect. That didn't quite pan out, but I still wanted to be in the creative field. So long story short, started working with developers because I was also interested in video games. It's like, yeah, but I also don't want to do game design. That's probably too artistic for me because I'm a terrible drawer. I can't. But then I kind of fell into UX and what that meant. So a lot of why I'm here today comes from that. And I am so happy to have met the people that I have that have led me to where I am. And really, it's because I have been working with teams for such a very long time that it's just, I couldn't do it, right? If I get a job that offers me way more than I make right now, but I would have to work alone, I probably wouldn't take it because that's the world I come from, that's the world I know, that's the world I want to be part of. So, UX. How many of you know what UX means? How many of you work with UX people? Awesome. So, because I don't like to make assumptions, I'm gonna start us off with what UX means, right? And this is one definition. There are many, but long story short, I just don't make the pretty thing, or I don't just put lipstick on a pig. That's not what UX is, right? UX is really something that encompasses anything that a customer or a user touches, whether that is visual, whether that's audio, whether that's even from the moment they even touch the thing you're building, that's all part of it. And really, one graphic that I kind of like to show around is that, we're pulling from different disciplines and different things in order to make something happen, right? We're pulling from psychology, which is one of the main ingredients from UX. Yes, we're pulling from art, visual design. Yes, we're probably pulling from science and technology because yes, just like art, it's not new. We're pulling from these different disciplines in order to turn it into its own thing that brings a different flavor into the mix. So a lot of it, and a lot of what I've known is this lean UX approach. And how lean UX kind of happened is that lean kind of started in the 1950s in this Toyota manufacturing plant. And then they kind of brought it over, and then somebody else kind of turned that into lean startups and tried applying that into the whole business model, which kind of got combined with design and design thinking, and now we're here. And really what it's trying to do is just bring the user to the middle. While you're doing this quick process, right? You're trying to build, you're trying to learn, you're trying to measure, and you're trying to eliminate a lot of the waste. that happens within that. So essentially, what you're trying to do is get to the product in a much quicker way. And you're trying to be more efficient in a lot of these things. You're trying to eliminate waste as you're doing it. And it's really more so a mindset than it is a checklist that you go through. So more so to kind of expose what I'm comparing it to is a more traditional approach is that, yeah, you have your empathy, hopefully you're talking to your users, you're doing that discovery part, and then you're kind of, as a team, or whoever is kind of dictating that vision, you kind of come up with like, yeah, I think this is what we're gonna do to move forward with, and then you throw a couple of ideas around, you get some sort of approval, yeah, that's the thing that we're gonna do. You start finalizing that design, you get it tested, you get feedback, and then from whatever you learn from, maybe you circle back, and then you have your implementation phase. And depending on where or how you work, traditional UX is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But it comes with a cost, just like anything. So it could be, it could cost you time, money, and effort, right? You can spend a long, long time trying to build something, and it's a very long and tedious process. So essentially what Lean UX, or the Lean UX approach is that it's really trying to do all these things in smaller chunks. You do have a vision that you're driving. You understand the bigger goal, but you're trying to do these in a much quicker way, and you always keep the user in mind. You're not only in mind, really close to home, right? You're constantly getting their feedback. You're learning, right? So you're not learning, you're doing something wrong. So again, we're coming up with these hypotheses, and we're constantly coming up with short experiments, small chunks that we're throwing out there, we're measuring whether that's good or not, and then that's gonna help us move forward. And then, again, it's not so much different, but how you implement it and how you kind of bring that closer before you spend a lot of time, money, and effort building the actual thing. So essentially, it's supposed to be faster, smarter, and user-based. So if it is faster, smarter, and more user-based, well, what exactly does that look like? What exactly does that mean? Well, part of it is that when you get early feedback, your team, the team that's building the thing, you make better decisions. You're more confident in the thing you're building. You know, it's like, yes, we are sure that this design is it, that it's awesome, that it's brilliant, it's functional, it's doing the thing that it's supposed to, it's solving an actual problem. And then in the beginning, you're throwing all these assumptions and you're asking all these questions, and then you're saying no to the things that are just not gonna cut it. Then it also provides an organized approach and a more discovery and experimental phase, which is, it's continuous. You're balancing all these things, you're feeding them into the things you're asking, right? You have your business goals, you have your user goals, and you have your technology pieces, and you're trying to spin all these plates, and you're trying to understand, okay, given all these requirements, given all these constraints, and given the problem that we're trying to solve for, what is the best solution that we can provide without spending a lot of time, money, and effort doing it, right? And then you're adding true value, and you're actually building something that's going to be sustainable because, again, you're making better decisions. You're not second-guessing what you built to a point where you're like, wow, did we really spend just like 3 months building this thing and we're not entirely sure, like 100% sure if it's going to work. And as a team, you feel confident and you have buy-in in what you're building. You're like, yep. And even if you fail, because that's part of all of this, you're learning, you don't make that mistake, but hopefully you're doing that not in huge chunks, right? spending 3 months, but rather in small incremental experiments that can lead to success. And the most important part is that you're eliminating waste. And that's how you're saving time, money, and effort, is by saying no to the things that you've already validated, that you've hopefully tested, that you've talked to your users, you show them, you've been keeping them in the loop, right? It's not just the team, but also involving the person you're solving the problem for, because that's kind of an important thing. It's really saying like, oh, this is just not gonna cut it. Don't put it in the backlog like I've been hearing all day, right? It's just, we've already talked about it, it's not gonna bring any value, just throw it away, and not being afraid to do that. So once again, it also allows the team to be transparent. When we understand all these things, when we are on board, when we are making better decisions, it becomes apparent why you're doing the thing you're building, why you're solving that problem. And when perhaps stakeholders or other teams start throwing wrenches at the thing you're building, hopefully the why, the reasoning, and all of that, it's solid enough. You have a solid foundation that, you know, when those questions kind of come in, you're like, boop, boop, yep, I have answers to that. This is why we're doing it. And people go like, yep, no, I get it. And then you expose that process, right? Because there's no reason not to. You do want to show how you're bringing in value and expose why you're doing it the way you're doing it. Because others can learn from that. So, another cool graphic that I've seen today is that, yes, essentially you are, UX essentially is trying to be in the center of it. It's trying to keep that user in mind, it's user-centric, while remembering that we have business goals, that we have technology that we're working on, and that's finicky, right? Like, is this actually feasible? Like, I can dream up beautiful designs all day, but one, they're probably not solving a real problem because I'm probably not keeping the user in mind, or they're probably not technically feasible depending on the technology that we're using, right? Just because VR is cool doesn't mean that you should be building something in VR. So even having those things in mind when you're trying to approach a solution. And of course, looks like we're a bunch of readers. So a couple of interesting books by Jeff, who started the whole Lean UX. I like to listen to his talk sometimes, and this is just the beginning, right? This is the beginning to the rabbit hole of UX. So there's plenty of other books, and I'm happy to recommend those. All right, so a little bit about process, what UX is, right? How that happens. Now I kind of want to jump into what that integration really looks like, because just like any other role, we do stuff that maybe half of our teammates don't understand. So, or maybe you have a new team that you're joining, or a new UX person that's joining the team, and you're like, well, okay, how does that relationship look like? What exactly do they do with the team? And I'm using this Scrum framework with UX, and that's not necessarily, you know, the only path, right? A lot of this applies to other A and W's and other words, big words. But it's really about, okay, well, you have a couple of steps that you usually go through as a team, whatever rituals those are. And how does that UX piece kind of look like? And it doesn't have to be a UX person doing it, right? Like, when I collaborate, I expect to have overlaps with the people I'm working, because, you know, we're in this Agile world learning all these things, and we're learning to integrate them into the way we work. So it's more so about not stepping on each other's toes, and use that as an opportunity to collaborate. And I'll talk more about that. So if we break that down, we start with, we have a product backlog. I have a famous backlog. And really, what that is that we're hopefully, before that even happens, we're out there doing discovery, and that we're empathizing, right? So that happens at what? We talk to users. We talk to them often. We try to understand their pains. We try to get into their shoes, right? And then we really try to understand that why. Without that why, again, you can't dodge those wrenches. You need to have a solid why, because when people start questioning, and even within the team, we're like, well, why are we doing the thing that we're doing? When those questions come up, it's good to understand and go back to, well, we're doing this because this is what we found out. And then how does all of that kind of relate back into a roadmap and the overall vision, right? So really understanding that, yeah, we have all those answers. Now, how do we actually execute them? And then there's some sort of sprint planning or some planning that happens. And during this phase, we're trying to focus on the immediate value. You're trying to keep the vision in mind. What is the overall goal? But what are the things that we want to immediately focus on? And then while we're doing this, we're validating. We're iterating, and we're constantly validating for those little pieces. This is where we probably start getting more into the details, right? We understand our end goal, but now it's time to maybe, okay, well, what's that truly gonna look like? And then we start brainstorming as a team, and then we'll get clarity on what we're building. And one of the important pieces here is that collaborative sketching. I don't want to be the only person in the room holding a marker, right? Or a whiteboard marker for that matter. I do want to get everybody in the room to sketch, right? If you can draw a circle, a square, or a triangle, you can probably draw the whole entire internet, right? Any interface that you've ever done. So it's really about getting what you're thinking into something that you can talk about, right? You want to get those ideas out there. Because, yeah, it looks great in our head, but the thing that you're thinking might not be the same thing that I'm thinking. So when you put it on paper, it gives you a starting point, and then you can move forward from there. And then you commit to something. You're like, okay, we know what we want. We're going to go and build it. So this is where that dedicated person is going to, all right, well, what does the content look like? What are the artifacts that I need to provide into whatever document you're using, whether that's, a story, Jira, whatever methodology you use or tool you use. What are the things that I need to create in order to make sure that we move forward? And along the way, what I found to be extremely successful is that, in my case, since I am the dedicated UX person in that team, is that I have those checkpoints. And that can be something set in stone, right? Like, we'll do this every, 2 days, and we'll see where we're at. Or it's more so like, I do it more so like, I like to keep my ear in the ground, right? Since I sit with my developers, with my team, it's more so of like, oh, hey, so how's the thing that you're building going, right? Again, if I want to get meta, my biggest user in the workplace are my teammates, right? So what are the things they need from me? How do I empathize with them, right? And not every person that I work with is going to be exactly the same. Some developers might be okay with just sketching a napkin, and they know exactly what they're going to do. Some need a little bit more granularity, right? So I need to spend a little time with them, try to get to know them. Because really, at the end of it all, you're with these people day in, day out. And when you establish checkpoints, you make sure that by the end of, for the sake of the argument, end of sprint, a day before you have a demo, you're like, that's totally not what I intended, right? And then panic and the alarm and everything is like, oh, we're out of time. It's like, oh God, we promised this other thing, right? So you're trying to avoid those things. And yeah, working together is just you're ensuring that the vision that you set out to build is taking place, right? And you can make those adjustments as you go along the way, because life and stuff happens, and sometimes you gotta be flexible. But you know what that's gonna look like towards the end, and hopefully there are no surprises. And speaking of the end, so towards the end, maybe you have a demo or a sprint review, or this is where you show the thing that you've been working on, right? However often that is. So you present your deliverables and you get feedback from the people. Hopefully you're getting also feedback from your users, because again, who are you building this for? And that's an opportunity to start considering, okay, well, let's go measure success, right? Did the thing that we set out to build actually truly successful? Okay, where did we miss the mark? And take that as a build, measure, learn opportunity. What can you learn from that? And even when something is successful, you're learning why it's successful. You're still learning something regardless. And then you review the outcomes. And if there's anything that didn't quite make it, or you missed the mark, or again, stuff happens during the building phase. Well, you make a point of, we should come back to this, talk about it, maybe during retro, or some other discussion after you've reviewed it. And you take a note, and it's like, well, how important is this? Does this relate to anything else? And you all circles back. So, again, we go back to the bigger picture that UX integration, whether that's one person doing a lot of these things, or maybe two people, or hybrids, right? Because that's kind of what we're moving towards, are doing these. We need to understand that we can't do this all within a sprint. I need to make sure that I'm working ahead of my developers, that I'm always keeping the bigger picture in mind, that I'm building towards that, and then when they need me to get granular, I go granular. So that way we can move forward. But it would be extremely hard for me to do a lot of that validation and design thinking and research and all of that within a sprint, because they wouldn't know what to build or what it would truly look like maybe a day or two, and that's just not gonna cut it. A day or two before the sprint ends, sorry. So, which kind of brings me to that last piece, where it's, what I've learned is that it's all about teams, right? I never want to go back to never working with a team. So the biggest piece really is that collaboration piece, is making sure that I am connecting not only with my users, but I'm connecting with my teammates, and that I'm bringing them over into the process, that we're all connecting towards what we're building. And that a team that works together can only make the user experience much better. That cannot, trust me, it's only for the best. It's not gonna make it any worse, I wouldn't think. And empathy, really. Again, empathy not only for your users and why you're building the thing you're building and their pains, it's empathy throughout the whole team, right? We're all human, we're all working together day in, day out. So that's part of it. It's like, how do I bring empathy when I'm doing all these things? And if we treat our teammates as hired help, whoever thinks that you're in for a bumpy ride, right? Because that's just not, it's all about good relationships, especially with engineers, because they're spending all that time building the code. And bridging. So I like to think of UX as a bridge. It's an opportunity to facilitate activities that improve collaboration, and whether that's you or the PO or the PM, you're making sure that that's happening. And especially found myself when you're working with more than one team at the same time, that you are providing that opportunity to bridge, right? It's like, I was working with so-and-so, and I heard this. It's like, maybe we should collaborate because it sounds like there might be some overlaps. And then you encourage creativity when you act as a bridge. And it can only help explore more opportunities, and it creates a larger view of the work. And you are also anticipating, kind of going back, the concerns that might come up, especially if you're if you're working with other people or across teams. So you always got to keep your ear and your listening skills active, and be like, ooh, sounds like we need to get together and talk about that, right? And you bring that up. And one of the biggest things I learned is that you gotta act as an open door policy, because design, at least great design, I don't think, happens in a box. And we kind of learned that, right? This is where you get the cliche, well, the designers did their thing and they tossed it over, and then you get grumpy developers going like, well, I don't know why we're building this way, and that communication kind of fails. So when I always make sure that I'm trying to include my team members in my process, right? Whether that's doing a testing phase, whether I am sketching out ideas, right? I'm making sure that whatever I'm doing, they can be one part of it too, see that what value I'm truly bringing. Because a lot of the stuff that happens within UX is still kind of a little misunderstood. We're the new kid in town. People don't truly know, especially if they've never worked with somebody that does these things. They're kind of like skeptical about it. It's like, well, what do they do all day, right? And when you're exposing the value that you truly bring. And it also helps talk through the things that you're working. So one example is that if I have my whiteboard and I have sketched something and I leave, maybe end of day, or I just leave to a meeting or whatever, and a developer's curious or somebody else is curious, they can totally see what I've been up to. And that can strike up a conversation. They can kind of see my thinking process. They can kind of see what I'm maybe having a hard time with. And they can jump into that, really. They can leave a note. They can be like, oh, hey, Maggie, I saw your sketch. I think I have something for you. Or have you thought about this? And that's really exciting, because that makes me feel like I've done part of my job, which is bringing them into the process, but it also helps with that collaboration piece. And yes, it's about showing that process. Yes, even the rough stuff, right? And again, I'm not the greatest sketcher in the world, and I'm not trying to be, because it's just a sketch. And if it gets the point across, it's all just a bunch of circles, squares, and triangles. But if you can tell that is a button, if you can tell that's an image and a page and an interface somewhere, my message got through. And when you do it that way, it makes it less intimidating for the other person, and there's nothing more exciting about when somebody who thinks they can't sketch grabs a marker and joins in. Oof. That makes me like all tingly inside, and it's like, yes, just keep doing it, yes. And I just kind of back out, right? And sometimes I intentionally say like, no, here, you do it, right? And I just kind of let them do their own thing, and I kind of help them through that. And that's part of that facilitation phase too. And the biggest piece is that with all that said, is like, what environment are you building, right? What type of environment do you want to work in? I'm doing all these things, and I can preach all day long, but if I'm not bringing it home, if I'm not fostering the type of environment that I want to be working in, I'm going to be unhappy. So I want a happy work environment. So I want to make sure that it's also a safe place and a safe environment where people can come in and provide their own feedback, be able to receive and provide that feedback, right? I always go out and be like, all right, what do you guys think? What did I miss, right? Look, provide those opportunities, but make it known that feedback is always welcome. And then that is valuable and safe to fail, right? I don't have all the answers. I don't expect them to have all the answers, but we're a collective group of smart people. We should be able to come up with something together. After we've collaborated, after we've done all the steps, hopefully right, there's bound to be something, right? And it's all about being that active participant. And that kind of burned me a little bit in the beginning, is that, well, what am I doing wrong? And somebody just had to, tell me, you just got to be a little bit more active. Be there. Be part of what they're doing. Be part of the rituals. Go to stand up more often, because what I hadn't pieced together at that time is that it's not only about the rituals, and it's like, well, I don't want to go to that one meeting. It's so boring. I never say anything, right? It's all technical. Well, I was actually missing out on building that trust, right? It's a face they get to see constantly, right? It's like, I can't trust a face that I have never seen, right? It's like, well, who are you and why are you saying the things you're saying, right? But when we start building that trust and that relationship, then I can be like, hopefully I will be the first thing that pops into their mind when they have a question that I can help with. But that won't happen if I'm not there. So, a couple of takeaways is that communication is key. And I think that everybody's given, or today I've learned that we kind of share that common theme where it's like communication is really important. And you gotta work on it, however. But it's really about learning the language, understand where people are coming from and what's their style, the technology that you're using, right? I can even mention I don't need to code by any means, but if I can understand the things that with what we're building, that can help me maybe provide better recommendations along the way. And understanding that I am a bridge. I am a bridge between different disciplines, or at least I like to believe that I am. And towards the end of it, that will only help me, right? It'll help me understand my audience better. So if I'm talking to my PM or my PO, I understand that language and how I should address certain things versus if I'm talking to my engineers. That's a little bit a different set of vocabulary that I need versus if I'm just geeking out with another UX person, people who don't understand that jargon are gonna be totally lost, but we understand each other. And I understand that I can freely do that with that other person. Another big thing is UX is an open door policy. And this is more so about why do you need to be in a black box? There's no need to it, right? There's enough misunderstanding, there's enough mystery around stuff. There's no need to keep siloed in a corner and be that weird designer that just pumps out designs and tell developers what to do in a corner, right? It's about bringing in people together. If I'm doing all these things, I'm hoping to bring my team with me every step along the way. And I hope that they do that with me too in their process. So that we can get to the problems and those solutions earlier on than later. Another big thing is collaboration. Is that I treat it as a design problem, right? I go back to that part that I talked about. It's like, well, how do my teammates work? I need to understand that. We live in a world where, everybody comes from a different background, where we want to use introverts, extroverts, those words, right, to identify ourselves. Like, what do they consider themselves one of those things? What do they think is their working style? And get me to understand a little bit about if they've also worked with somebody like me, right? Because that's an entirely different conversation than me jumping into a team who's had a dedicated UX person. And that's some of the key differences. It's like, okay, maybe I know that I need to do a little bit of more teaching here than more so in that other team. And that's okay, because it's only gonna build trust, value, and shared understanding. But you gotta have that in mind. And as you go, as you're collaborating, taking a step back and being like, okay, well, what are the things that are working? What are the things that are truly moving us forward? And where am I failing, right? Same way that I've walked past my developers and be like, hey, so how's the thing you're working on doing? And I just do a quick checkup. Same way it's like, hey, so I've been trying out this new approach with the developer handoff or the way that I provide you stuff. Is that working? Am I missing the mark with something? You know, but they say some things. You also gotta I also need to apply my don't be a waiter, be a doctor hat, which is more so like what are they saying versus what they truly mean. But that's a whole different conversation. And really is don't be a gatekeeper, right? I've learned so many things from various people that I would have never learned, either in school or maybe just working with another designer, right? Like there are stuff from my POs, my PMs that I'm like, damn, that's a really good approach, or that's a really good skill to have. How can I use that? Or also, again, it's like it'll help me communicate better with them because now I understand that process or that tool that they use, and I can use that when I talk to them. And same thing with developers, right? Yeah, I don't need to code, but if I know a little bit about it, maybe that makes things way easier. You never know who you're going to work with. So, learning to be flexible is that not only you need to be flexible, but so does your solutions, right? We don't know when technology is going to hit us with big limitations and things that are just not going to work. So, okay, well, we talk about all these things. We have a solution in mind. Where should we be flexible? Where can we be flexible, and what can we do about it? And really, it comes down to, well, what hill are you worth dying on? Right? I'm sure there are moments where I'm like, oof, you know, that's not exactly what we talked about, but it's gonna be okay because it is solving the solution, the problem that we set out to solve. It's okay, it's not perfect. We'll learn from it, right? We'll write it down, we'll measure, we'll understand, and we'll have a conversation around it. And we also are learning that the technology has its limitations. So we're, okay, what do we do next? But also, like, you know, is that where you're gonna be like, nope, it's either this or that, or I just can't let this slide. But really having a conversation is not so much like a me or the highway type of situation. It's more so like, okay, well, how do we work through this together? And last but not least is that none of this is worth it, or it's just not going to work if UX doesn't have a seat at the table. And I mean the grown-up table, not the kids' table by the side of the grown-ups table. It needs to be part of the process. Again, whether that's a dedicated UX person or somebody who's a hybrid doing all these things, people need to understand its value in order for it to be successful. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep getting that same misunderstood, like, yeah, that UX thing, let's do the UX thing. God, if I had a nickel. But really, it's all about that clear understanding, the value that we're bringing into this whole process. And as we move forward in this Agile world, UXers are coming if you don't have them already. You can't stop it. We're coming for you. And truly, again, even if it's not a dedicated person, the things that we're doing are probably going to be useful in your process. And really, if nothing works, everything fails, try something else. And I really can't think of something more agile than that. Thank you.